Got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. You can follow me at the Draft Bard on Twitter, and welcome on into another wonderful episode of Unbearable Sports. So you can follow the podcast at Unbearable Sports on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, anywhere you want. Make sure to follow, because that's really where we post all the new updates and really keep you informed as a Chicago Bears fan. There's been so much going on, but right now, as you can see, I am wearing black right now because it's about time we finally put the Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace era to rest. It's about time we host a little funeral and put it to rest. It's been long enough, but we want to turn the page. We want to be officially done. But there's honestly a lot of stuff that we can learn from this era and kind of take that away. And moving forward, what do we hope happens with the new regime? So let's get right into it then, because we got to put this stuff behind us. So what we're going to do is we're first just going to review kind of the press conference. It happened a while back, but just want to talk a little bit about it because there's a couple things that we definitely just need to take away. This is what it's all about. What can we take away from the era, and also how the era ended? But then go into the Matt Nagy era. What was good? What was bad? And what can we kind of learn from it? How could we have avoided some of these mistakes? And going into Ryan Pace, what did he do well? He did a lot of things well. He also did a lot of things wrong. And what can we hope moving forward, like we said, for the new regime? So let's get into it. First off, we got to talk about this press conference because the press conference just kind of showed where the problems lie. And I just want to highlight this before we get into everything, because you really saw what the McCaskies were all about. You saw Ted Phillips not being able to handle any questions about football, and same thing with McCaskey. So obviously we hope that everything is better moving forward, but just us as Bears fans, it's difficult when you kind of don't have a lot of confidence in leadership, in ownership. You really need somebody to really kind of take the reins. And are they going to allow people to take the reins? Most likely not. But that's just something we have to see with the new regime moving forward. But honestly, don't try and burn bridges with Olin Kreutz and the rest of the Bears players. All us Bears fans just wants to see that Brian Urlacher type of era people just kind of come back to relevance. So I think for us, we want to see Olin Kreutz being more involved, or Charles Tillman being more involved. That's because we're Bears fans. We enjoy stuff like that. We enjoy the good old days, because you'll kind of see there wasn't a lot of really good days for the past decade, basically. And Matt Nagy, honestly, had the best years. So let's get right into Matt Nagy, because Matt Nagy, when he was fired, a lot of people were calling for his head, but I just want to review what he was all about and what he did well, because I'm looking at this and I got to say, I'm tired of anything that's showing Matt Nagy versus Trestman versus Fox, and they're saying you have to only pick one head coach. Who would it be? Guys, this is an easy question. The answer is clearly Matt Nagy. And anyone that wants to fight me on it, go ahead, because Matt Nagy's record was 34-31. John Fox, 14-34. Trestman, 13-19. Now, obviously, there was differences in teams, but you saw that who Matt Nagy was a lot better than Trestman or Fox. And there's a lot of things that you can kind of take from those teams. Mark Trestman had a phenomenal offense. That's honestly been the best offense in my lifetime that I've ever seen. We were number 2 in scoring his first year. It's absolutely crazy, because as a Bears fan, it was the polar opposite. The offense was really good, but as soon as he took over, you didn't see that leadership mentality to him. The defense was ranked 30th. It was terrible. And everybody eventually hated Mark Trestman, even though that the offense was pretty good. Then everything started falling off. He wasn't able to manage the locker room. And because of that, he was fired after 2 seasons. Fox, he was only here for about 3 seasons, but still a record of 14-34. Absolutely abysmal. I remember watching games going, there's no way we're going to win this. I have never felt that negative on a team until John Fox came around, because you knew they were running it on first down. You knew they were running it on second down. And then you knew nothing was going to happen when they passed the ball on the very next play. Nothing was going to happen. The defense was pretty solid. This is when you kind of saw some Vic Fangio come in, and the defense started playing a whole lot better. It was really nice, but the offense was absolutely terrible. And John Fox, he seemed like he held stuff together, but it was just very boring. But that's why I wanted to go into Matt Nagy. Nagy, let's highlight the good. Then there's plenty of bad, which we will be going through. But I will purposely bring up Trestman. I bring up Fox because Trestman was a good offensive mind. Fox probably a little bit better in the locker room. But Matt Nagy really came in and really was that leader. You saw a lot of people rally around Matt Nagy, and he was the dude. And the biggest reason, everyone says just how good of a person, how good of a just overall leader he was. And he really showed that. He was the leader of the team. He introduced Club Dub, which I love. I know some people were iffy on it. They're like, do you still want to celebrate when your team's bad? Yes. It's about the culture. It's about celebrating. It's about really wanting to win. And honestly, if your players came to you and said, listen, we haven't deserved anything, then you listen to your players. But it's something for them to always look forward to. And I love that he introduced that. I think that that's a big reason for winning, because you want people to celebrate the wins. He talked about that. He talked to Madden, the old Cubs coach, and he said, celebrate the wins. And that's how he came up with it. And he ended up winning Coach of the Year in 2018. And honestly, it's really sad for us Bears fans, because we keep looking back at 2018 like we won the freaking Super Bowl. I do that all the time. I think back to it. I'm like, man, we were good. We're 12-4. The Packers have been 13-3 ever since Matt LaFleur has come into power 3 years ago. Imagine that. Imagine being so good that you were constantly 13-3. We're 12-4, and that was one of our best years ever. Best year in a decade, at least, since the Lovie Smith era, where we eventually made it to a Super Bowl. Yet again, another achievement that did not end in a Lombardi trophy. That obviously is what we want to be going for, is finally winning a Lombardi trophy in my lifetime. I think that somebody, I forgot who it was, posted out there, who remembers the 1985 Bears, like truly remembers watching it. Now, this isn't a whole age thing. This is just calling out that it's been almost 40 years since the 1985 Bears. And if the average lifespan is about 80 years, you're talking about half of the people at least don't know what the 1985 Bears were all about. We saw it on film. We did not watch it live. Majority of Bears fans. So unfortunately, we need some dubs. We need some wins. We need a true leader. And that's what Matt Nagy seemed to be when he came in. We were winning football games. We also had a decent running game because of Mitch Trubisky. It was a simple offense, but it was a lot better. I remember watching it going, wow, we have an offensive play caller. This is really cool. And just kind of continuing on some of this good stuff, a lot of just being a good person in the locker room really solves a lot of things. We saw it with a lot of losing streaks. We had some losing streaks, but the team kept playing with John Fox, with Trestman. When we got on a losing streak, you saw people give up. And it really wasn't until this year I saw people give up. And that's why winning solves everything. You can be a good person, and that lasts for about 2 years. That's why we were 8-8. We went 12-4, 8-8, and 8-8. And I think honestly, a lot of it has to do with Nagy was always there and always boosting up the team. But after a while, the fourth season going into this, the third kind of like losing season, really, you start to give up. And that's what it means, is that you might be really good as a person, but you have to be good as an offensive mind if you are coming in to be that offensive mind. And honestly, that's really the good. I think that he seemed to just come in, and in 2018 it seems different. He had all these trick plays. He was having fun with it. And I think then let's switch over to the bad, because to me, I think the media got to him. I think when he started to kind of second guess everything was when some people were saying, "Why did you run this cutesy play to get 1 yard? Just run it straight." And then everything that he started doing just seemed like he was overthinking everything. And a lot of things too, he kept trying to be himself. And I think that was the hardest part. Him being himself was him pretending to be Andy Reid. And I think that's the hardest part of this is he's kept saying, be you, be you. But every time that you heard him in an interview, he never really talked about himself. A lot of times he would kind of talk about, well, Andy Reid would always do this. Andy Reid would do that. So, my time at Kansas City, this is what we want to do. Now, I work a normal day job, and I talk about my previous day job. I've been at different places. And yes, I talk about my previous work experience in certain situations. But you never want to be that guy that always only talks about his previous work experience, because it just makes it seem like you're kind of disinterested in your current job. And that's what it always seemed like is, well, this is how we did it at my old job, and that's what we're going to do, rather than this is what I am going to do, and this is how I am going to solve this. He kept saying, we have to see the what's, we have to see why this isn't working. And it really kind of boiled down to him. And speaking of things that just didn't work with him, it was this running game was terrible. Just as a whole, I looked at this. Our leading runners only got over 4 yards a carry once when he was the play caller. And actually, technically, he wasn't the play caller when we averaged over 4 yards a carry, because I just want to run through this. When he came in 2018, we were a good team, but Jordan Howard only 3.7 yards average running the football. Before that, he had multiple 1,000-yard seasons. It seemed to be like the running back of the future. We really liked him. And then all of a sudden, Nagy came in, and it wasn't working. But Tariq Cohen was averaging a good handful of yards, and same thing with Mitch Trubisky. And that's why you kind of see some of the stats a little skewed. They say that we were 11th in rushing yards, and a lot of that was because of Mitch Trubisky running the football. It wasn't Jordan Howard at all. Now, part of this too, I remember us all saying, well, looks like Jordan Howard's out. It's because of him that he's not running the football well. Then in comes David Montgomery. In 2019, only averaged 3.7 yards a carry, exactly like Howard. Here's his running back, David Montgomery. We even had Mike Davis come in. We cut Mike Davis. We had Montgomery as the starter, and we still only averaged 3.7 yards with our starting running back. Then in 2020, that's when Montgomery got 4.3, his best ever of his career. And a big reason was he went on a tear at the end of the year. Why? Bill Lazor was calling the plays. As soon as he gave over play calling duties, all of a sudden, we could run the football. And I think that's just what's so baffling is, how can Matt Nagy not call successful run plays, but as soon as you switch it over to Lazor, everything starts working? I think it just kind of shows what he wasn't able to do as a play caller. We couldn't run the football, just plain and simple. Because even though that Montgomery had 4.3, Cordero Patterson, who was kind of our backup running back, 3.6 yards. And then this year, Montgomery, even though that he seemed like a beast, only averaged 3.8 yards a carry. Only 3.8. Another season without over 4 yards a carry. It seems like that's just the standard that everyone should be getting. except for us, except for us with Matt Nagy. Now, we need to be able to run the ball. I don't think running the ball is the most important thing out there, but you need to run it efficiently. And that's the thing. Efficiency is the name of the game. And when we would run the football with Matt Nagy, we couldn't. I remember going, why are we running this football? Like, it's just not looking good. And we kept begging to pound the rock more, but it just wasn't working. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was. It just didn't work under Matt Nagy. Now, it wasn't like all of a sudden the passing game got super, super successful. On the flip side, we never had an offense that was over the 20th ranked offense in the league. In 2018, we were 21st for yards per game. That was the best. Then 29th, 26th, and then 24th. Now, this is just abysmal. It's not good when you're supposed to be this quarterback guru, this quarterback's coach, and the passing numbers, we were 21st in 2018 in passing yards, 25th, 22nd, and then this year, 30th. That's terrible. Now, you're supposed to be this quarterback guru that has this amazing offense that's supposed to come in, and we aren't able to throw the ball. We aren't able to pass the ball anywhere. Now, you are supposed to be winning games passing the football. And that, to me, is just one of the biggest issues why you had to get rid of Matt Nagy. Because if you come in as an offensive guru, as an offensive juggernaut, and you cannot run an offense, you have to be gone. I think that's just where ultimately, when you talk about what was bad, he's this offensive guy. He can rally the troops. He's this offensive guy to come in with his offense, and his offense never worked. And I think the biggest issue that I had is he just kept trying to make it work. And I think a perfect example of this was in 2020. Not a lot of people knew this. We were 8th in passing attempts. We threw the ball 8th most times. Now, it might have been because we were down a lot, but we were 22nd in yards. That means we're throwing the ball a bunch, but it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to the proper receivers. It's just not working. And I think for that, we talk about efficiency. Overall, this was not an efficient offense. He could only get stuff when it was scripted. And to me, when I look at him as a coach, when I look at him as that leader, I think his biggest issue is the adjustments. We talk about it over and over again that he just was not a good halftime adjuster. And I felt too, he could only score on his scripted plays. We heard this all the time. I felt like we never knew that scripting plays was a thing. I mean, some people did, yes, but I felt like nobody talked about it. And then as soon as he comes in, we talk about it because that's the only time that he can actually, score points. I remember going, all right, well, we got our touchdown on the first drive, as is tradition. And now we're not going to score anything else. Now we aren't going to score until the beginning of the third quarter, because that's when he can script everything. He's got everything together, and he doesn't have to think on the fly. He just says, this is what we're running, this is what we're doing, and that's that. You heard it all the time that he just couldn't change. He couldn't change his game plan that he created because that's the game plan. That's how we thought we were going to attack. And you hear about any good coach, that's what they do. They change their game plan mid-game. I hear this with like Matt LaFleur, where in the first quarter, he'll purposely do things just to see what the defense is going to throw at him and then change whatever he's going to do to counter that. Matt Nagy could never do that. Could never do that in a million years. And unfortunately, that's why he's not here. He just flat out could not do it. He could not adjust. And that's why he's flat out not here. Now, what could have potentially made this better? Now, what can we learn from this? Now, I already said this, but just kind of that whole be you thing. Now, I like it as the motivational thing. Just be yourself. But at the same time, be yourself. Don't be Andy Reid. But also have the humility to also be able to change what you want to do based on your personnel. That was always a huge thing. He wanted his people and he wanted his offense to be ran. But sometimes you don't get the cards that you want. You just have to make do with what you have. And it seemed like he never wanted to do that. And I think a great example of this was the quarterbacks. And I think this is also the biggest reason why he's gone. First year, we said, well, Trubisky's going to get better. So we have that. So Trubisky will get better. But then our running game is gone. Let's get rid of Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard is the problem. We get rid of Jordan Howard. Running game still not fixed. Well, I know what the problem is. We have to get rid of our offensive coordinator. You see Helfrich get out. Then you see Harry Heastand get out because it's our offensive line. They're not blocking properly. We get rid of one of the most well-respected offensive line coaches, and we change around offensive coordinators, but still we're not seeing the results. And we're just kept doing the blame game. It's the quarterback. Now, Mitch Trubisky, I stand firm that I think Mitch Trubisky can win you games. He obviously can. It's because of his feet. I think that he shows how important a running quarterback is. Because for him, it's you look at the first read. If it's not there, I'm going to run. It's a solid plan, but eventually people start game planning for that. And you want to do something just a little bit better. Now, honestly, I think that's why he just didn't succeed here. But in comes Nick Foles. Nick Foles comes in and kind of starts crapping all over Nagy's offense and starts you kind of hear him say, well, we should be doing this. We should be doing that. And then you start to see that Nagy doesn't like to change, that he's not going to change his stuff. And it's really on him. Now, then obviously this year we had Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, and Justin Fields. Arguably all of them better than Mitch Trubisky. You can make the case either way, but basically you have quarterbacks that should be able to run a system. And obviously they didn't. So see you later, Matt Nagy. We no longer have him. But I do want to just call one other thing out. Now, what else can we learn from this hiring of Matt Nagy? With just head coaches in general, moving forward, years down the road, decades down the road, what can we take from this? Now, something that just kind of stands out is he only had 1 year of experience as an offensive coordinator. And I think that really showed up, out here because you saw this young guy come in and he's a good person. He took the entire locker room by storm, but you look at his experience. He was a coaching intern, quality control, quarterbacks coach, then offensive coordinator for 1 year, quarterbacks coach for 4. He wasn't creating game plans. He wasn't play calling. And that was his biggest struggle. Yeah, he could bring everyone together. He was a hype man, but ultimately he just couldn't develop an offense. And to me, I just think it was a lack of knowledge on the offensive side, lack of experience. Now, the big question is, will he get another shot? Honestly, I think he will get another shot. I think definitely as an offensive coordinator, but honestly, I think he could maybe have a McDaniels type of treatment from New England. I think some people are going to be looking at him as another head coach. He had a winning record. He did well. And if he just has a good handful of experience, a Leslie Frazier type of situation with a little bit more experience running an offense, calling the plays, I think that's what he needs in order to then get a new head coaching job. So I don't think it's in this decade. I think it's in 2030 that he potentially gets another opportunity. But don't be surprised if he is someone that people start talking about, 10 years down the road because of his success as a leader. And then now with his, potential experience that he's going to be gaining for the future. So that's a lot about Matt Nagy. And you know what? I wish I had something on my desk to kind of signal that he's now done. We are now done with the Matt Nagy era. We're now moving on because actually I have one other thing. So we're not done yet. The only other thing that I just want to call out are the headlines that some players were just kind of done with them. And yet again, it just kind of echoes why and how winning solves everything. So, Matt Nagy, bon voyage. Good luck in the future. And honestly, I'm going to look back at this and I'm going to smile at it. I seriously liked the Matt Nagy era because we were actually winning games. It was so abysmal with everyone else. And yes, I will just watch 2018 over and over again. And I got to say, that's better than all the other years in this past decade. So that's the unfortunate truth for us Bears fans. But I'm excited for the future. And that's why I'm excited to also turn this page. So the next guy, we got to go through Ryan Pace. Ryan Pace, he's been here for a very long time. He was with the Bears all the way back in, 2015. That's when he was hired on. He was hired on with John Fox, and then you bring in like a Vic Fangio, other people like that. And honestly, his team really, I like what I saw out of him. I just want to kind of go through. I just kind of see some of the draft picks. Now, before him, the draft picks were terrible. I just want to bring this up because I forgot how bad we were at drafting until he came in. So the year before he came in, we drafted Kyle Fuller and then Ego Ferguson and Will Sutton, if anyone remembers them, Kadeem Carey, Brock Vereen, David Fales, Pat O'Donnell. Some people would say you should never draft a punter, and Charles Leno. So literally, like, your best picks are your first and last pick. But then you go to a couple other years. We had like Shea McClellan, Alshon Jeffrey was the only good player, and then Brandon Harden. Then Evan Rodriguez, Isaiah Fry, Greg McCoy. Another year, Gabe Karimi, Stephen Paya, Chris Conti, God forbid, Nathan Enderle, JT Thomas. What I'm getting at is a lot of these are really, really bad. I remember this one thinking that this was going to be not knowing much about the draft at the time. We had Jerron Gilbert, the guy that could jump out of pools, Joaquin Iglesias, who literally never saw the field, Henry Melton, who was good for a couple of years and got banged up, DJ Moore, Johnny Knox, who got banged up, unfortunately, Marcus Freeman, Al Afalava, Lance Lewis, Derek Kinder. So I just want to kind of bring that up because when Pace took over, I give him a lot of credit because you hear when Pace came in, he revamped the facilities. He revamped Hallis Hall. He revamped how this team works. And for the Bears, they're forever in his debt because people inside the Bears credit him for all these revamped facilities and just really kind of taking football seriously, or taking it a little bit more seriously than the previous regimes. And really, the drafting, I thought he did a pretty good job. I liked what he did. But the problem was that he missed big. He's going to be forever tied to Mitch Trubisky and Khalil Mack. And let's actually go into that, because to me, that's the thing with Ryan Pace. That's the hardest part, is he's defined by those two trades. And we're going to hear about it for the end of eternity, the trade for Mitch Trubisky. Just an absolutely boneheaded decision to trade up one spot for a quarterback. And I just want to kind of defend it a little bit. People honestly were writing Patrick Mahomes off as a bust because they saw all these tools, but they said he didn't know how to play quarterback. And even as admitted, he didn't know how to play quarterback until like his second or third year. So it's really just that Andy Reid offense. Trubisky was kind of seen as the kind of safer prospect. Deshaun Watson, to me, was my number one guy. He's the person I would have gone with, but the Bears decided to trade up. And ultimately, that's what he's defined with, is making one of the worst trades. And it's really not about Trubisky, more so Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. But also, I want to just talk about the Khalil Mack trade and kind of who won that trade, because I'm always a big fan of the analytics, and I know that the analytics say that the Bears lost the Khalil Mack trade. And you see this year, Khalil Mack's been banged up. Khalil Mack was banged up the year before. He was banged up the year before and the year before. But honestly, I look at this and I loved the Khalil Mack trade. And the biggest reason is I think about it and I know that real life is not a video game, but there's a lot of things that you can take from like a video game, like a Madden, and put it into the real world. And what I mean by that is this Bears team, it, foreseeable, like if you really think about this, we were a Super Bowl contender if Trubisky panned out. You have a rookie deal quarterback and you have a good, talented defense. You have a good, talented team. So what did they decide to do? We are terrible at the outside pass rush position. Let's trade for this future Hall of Famer. And I think that's the key thing is when you trade for a future Hall of Famer in the prime of his career, that's different than like when there was the trade for Frank Clark. Frank Clark had like one good season and they gave up the same haul that was for Khalil Mack for Frank frickin' Clark. See, that's a bad trade. You traded someone for a pretty good player, but when you get the top player, there's something different about that Hall of Fame player. Something different about trading for Jalen Ramsey than it would be trading for, I don't know, like Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, phenomenal corner. But Jalen Ramsey is Jalen frickin' Ramsey. There's that difference. Khalil Mack was that difference. And that's why I stand by it. If Mitch Trubisky was a good player, think about this. If Trubisky was Deshaun Watson, this would be a Super Bowl. We would have had a Super Bowl. We would have had, it would have been amazing because you have to play to win. And I agree with that. You have the rookie quarterback and you're making the big deal to bring in the big Hall of Fame pass rusher. And honestly, it would have worked if the quarterback would have hit. So to me, I stand with the Khalil Mack trade, but obviously Trubisky, yeah, that was trash. That was absolute trash on his behalf. But let's actually go through a couple of his other trades that he did make. Now, the thing that he did do decently is he kind of like got some late round picks for a little bit of like kind of trash, if you will. Jordan Howard, not a lot of people wanted him. They got a 6th round pick. Adam Shaheen, we were going to cut him. We got a 6th round pick. Anthony Miller, we were going to cut him. Got a draft pick for him. Jakeem Grant, we traded for him for a late round pick. And Eddie Pinheiro, same thing, a late round pick. But you kind of go back and forth and you're like, well, why did we trade for a kicker? Is Jakeem Grant really going to still be on the team? That's all, iffy types of things. But honestly, I got to just applaud him for those kind of small little things. But really, that's where it boils down to. He hit small, but he missed big. His big moves failed. His small moves hit. And since we're kind of talking a little bit about the draft, I just kind of want to go through some of these picks because I think this kind of shows what I'm talking about, where he would miss big and he would make it even worse. Because Kevin White, you draft this guy that's very toolsy. This is your first draft pick. Obviously a huge bust. Maybe it turns out better if he didn't get injured, but still he was seen as that high upside guy rather than anything else. And then Hronis Grasu, I remember watching him going, this guy is not that big. He's not that big of a guy. And it's just bad in the trenches. And we got him in the 3rd round. But I sent this to my buddy. If you look at our 5th round draft picks compared to our 1st round draft picks, you might pick a team with our 5th rounders rather than 1st rounders, or at least when they were on the Bears. Because if you had Roquan Smith, Trubisky, Leonard Floyd, and Kevin White versus Bilal Nichols, Jordan Howard, Adrian Amos, and I can't find another one, and actually like Darnell Mooney. You're talking about some really good players that he found in the 5th round. And when the problem too is these players never did much on our team. Leonard Floyd's doing well in LA, but did nothing for us. And Kevin White, obviously did nothing. And Trubisky was just And that's the thing. They're never kind of going on to that second deal. We're seeing people like Adam Shaheen picked in the second, didn't do much. But then you see Eddie Jackson, Tariq Cohen, both fourth rounders. You're seeing more and more of that. Like this year, you saw Travis Gibson, another fifth rounder, kind of step up. I think that's just the problem, is that those under the radar picks that he would make would do really well. But then those big high profile picks never really worked out. And I will say too, just with his draft strategy, one of the things that I just did not agree with was he always liked to trade up. Now, I'm a big draft fan. You can follow me at the Draft Bard, and I have different blogs that I write about the NFL draft. I have my own big board. I love the NFL draft. And I love to think that I know a decent amount about the NFL draft, but I got to say, the NFL draft is a giant lottery. And just like with the lottery, you want the most tickets because that gives you the best chance of hitting on a player. Now, obviously, there's the times where, you just make a flat out stupid pick. Like that person was just not good value. But really, with the draft, you need to have a lot of lottery tickets. So the idea is that if you trade some of your draft capital for someone, so let's just go to Anthony Miller. We basically traded our next year's second round draft pick and a couple extra picks for Anthony Miller. When we drafted him, he's saying that I think Anthony Miller is better than us drafting a second round wide receiver next year and us drafting a receiver with the other picks that they gave up. Now, the chances of Anthony Miller hitting were okay, but the chances of another second rounder and a couple other picks hitting are a lot greater. And that's just the thing, is by him trading up all the time, trading up for Leonard Floyd, trading up for Mitchell Trubisky, trading up for Anthony Miller, trading up for even like David Montgomery. These trade ups, eventually you start to miss and you start to get rid of other picks that could be other players. So really, that's just a strategy that I never agreed with, and he just kept on doing. And I think that's just what makes it hard, is because it's his high conviction plays that he says, I have to get this guy. And he goes up and he gets them, which I applaud. But when you're talking about the grand scheme of things, the grand, like how you're supposed to play the draft, really not the best. But speaking of not the best, I want to actually talk about why I think he deserved to be fired. Because, like I said, I liked his draft classes. I'm looking through it, and I didn't like Cole Kmet, but he's still like, some people liked him there. Jalen Johnson, obviously. Travis Gibson, I liked. Mooney. He was able to pick a good handful of people and was way better than what we've seen in years and years. So his drafting, I don't fault him too much. Just don't trade up. Don't just, you got to hit basics. And they always talked about it for the Ravens. Hit doubles. Don't always go for the home run. But I want to talk about the worst thing that he did. And honestly, the worst thing that he did was his free agent signings. It was terrible. And same thing, he would hit small, but then miss big. So some of his small hits, he signed Akeem Hicks to a very small deal compared to who he was. Obviously, Akeem Hicks is Akeem Hicks. Danny Trevathan on his first deal was small. Allen Robinson, small deal. Jarrell Freeman, if we all remember him, small deal when he came in. And there we had two amazing inside linebackers, two very good signings. Bobby Massey, a very modest deal when he originally came in. Prince Amukamara, Taylor Gabriel, Jason Peters, even Clinton Dixon, Deshaun Gibson. These small little deals that really kind of go through, like people don't really see, but they turned out to be big. He makes these small, the small draft picks, the small signings, and gets good production. But then, yet again, when he has conviction, that's when he messes up. I think about this. You see Tariq Cohen. I love Tariq Cohen. You pay this running back a very hefty deal. You're paying him like a top running back. And I love him. a huge fan, but he wasn't worth that money. And I really hate that he got injured. Obviously, even if he was fully healthy, I would still say the same thing. I thought that we overpaid. It's just easy now because he's hurt. Um, but you see, like Trey Burton, we had he's the worst at signing tight ends because he tried to sign Trey Burton, he signed Jimmy Graham, he signed Deion Sims, if we remember him. And it's just that, like, his tight ends were terrible, but he has that conviction play. He signs Deion Sims, and we're like, why? We cut him. Pernell McPhee, Buster Screen. There's so many of those. We see Nick Foles, the terrible trade, because it's like those convictions. Maybe Nagy had something to say about Foles, but you see Foles, you see Glennon, you see all these different things. Marcus Cooper, if you remember him. There's all the Marcus Wheaton, all these weird signings that we had, that it was these high kind of conviction plays that this is my guy that I'm going to go get. And he misses big. And then eventually what ends up happening is something similar to this year. What happened this year? Honestly, he just set us up for failure. So we had to cut a lot of those players. Now, I know that there's a lot of hate for Charles Leno and there's a lot of hate for Bobby Massey. But to me, I was always, you should just cut one of them. But he ends up cutting two because he had to. He had to cut Kyle Fuller because he had to. He had to cut all these people because of the salary cap situation, because he didn't put himself in a good situation to manage the cap. Now, yes, we had a pandemic. You couldn't predict that. But still, it's just his management of the cap and just his big signings that really make it hard to maneuver. Because when you sign Jimmy Graham to a deal and you keep Jimmy Graham and then you sign him and move the money around, it just makes no sense. You should have given him that amount of money to begin with. But then that's where you see the re-signing of Danny Trevathan for extra money that he really kind of wasn't worth. And even Bobby Massey, I remember when they signed the deal, it's like, do you know how old Bobby Massey is? He's not going to be able to play out that life of that deal. And you ended up having to cut him because it was just a bad deal. And I think, too, something that he always was doing, you would always hear, well, you can get out of this deal the second year. You can get out of this deal the third year. You're basically signing people and saying, you know what? We're going to be done with you in about a year. So that's okay. If this just doesn't turn out, we're just going to take a little bit of a cap hit and you're going to be gone. It's like, why are you signing people that way? Just to get out of it. Obviously, the cap is managed a certain way. So you do have outs, but it seemed like you always had to play for that out because of just how bad some of his deals were. And I'm just looking at some of our salary caps right now. You have Allen Robinson. You should have re-signed him. Now, I know that everything's been going on, but you franchise him. That's $18 million in cap space that hits us. And Robert Quinn, now I do want to talk about Robert Quinn a little bit. I was not a fan of the signing. And still today, even though that the dude drops 18 and a half sacks, I'm still like kind of questioning, why do you do the signing? And obviously, I'm so happy that he's doing well. I love seeing him play, and I love him as a player. You see just how he is. But you sign an aging speed lineman, speed edge rusher to a huge deal with a lot of guaranteed money. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Obviously, he has the resurgence. You couldn't have predicted that. You really couldn't. But it's just to me, the concept of the deal just still didn't make sense. You're giving so much guaranteed money to him. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. It just didn't seem like the right thing to do. Just like it wasn't the right thing to let Nick Kwiatkowski walk, but then you re-sign Danny Trevathan. Kwiatkowski hasn't been amazing, but Danny Trevathan, they gave him so much guaranteed money that you're strapped to him for another couple of years from a money perspective, and you can't get rid of him. And if you get rid of him, you're basically just eating the contract. So that's just where, to me, a lot of those, after he makes a good decision, he kind of doubles down on it and it just didn't do well. So to me, that's just where I just had a lot of issues was with his salary cap management. And because of these bad deals that he would sign to people, you couldn't sign people. We were begging, like, we need to sign another corner. We need to sign another lineman. We need to sign another person. We just couldn't because the way that the cap was managed. We had so much money in just dead cap. We had it was just so difficult for us to do anything. We had $9 million going to Kyle Fuller this year. Basically 4 million to Bobby Massey, 3.3 to Buster Screen, 2.3 to Charles Leno. Then you look at the quarterbacks, and even though that we don't have a rookie, we have a rookie quarterback, we're still paying Nick Foles 6.6 million. So it's just that dooming the team because of the way that he would manage the cap. It just wasn't good. But that's about it that I have to say about Ryan Pace. It's a lot of stuff, and I'm just happy that it's all done. But I just want to go through just what we learned from Ryan Pace. We don't talk a lot about what he did with the facilities, but honestly, that's one of the best things that he did do. You want to see somebody that can really take control, not just of the decisions of who's on the team, but really about the facilities, the entire team. You want to see something with that, and he did that very well. Another thing too, don't trade up. I'll talk about this again. Like I love talking about it. Don't trade up unless it's for a quarterback, because quarterback is such a valuable position that if you feel like this is the guy, trade up, because it gives you a higher chance to win because of the position. It's very, very valuable. But also too, you just gotta sometimes you just gotta let people walk. You gotta let Tariq Cohen walk. You gotta let, I know people don't like hearing this, but even like David Montgomery, you have to see what he's gonna want to ask for, and you might have to let him walk. You have to let you have to make those hard decisions. Don't just try to re-sign them like a Danny Trevathan. You really shouldn't have done that deal. And it was kind of obvious that you shouldn't have done that deal, but he did and gave a lot of guaranteed money. But the last little thing is take the best available player. I think that Ryan Pace started learning a lot about that during his draft history. And it's just don't overthink the pick. Take the good talent. Now, one of my favorite picks that I just want to highlight because I just want to talk about this is Roquan Smith. Roquan Smith was one of my favorite picks, not because of what he is now. Obviously, now it's just like easy hindsight. But I remember talking to people because this was the year of Leighton Vander Esch, Terrell Edmonds, and or Tremaine Edmonds and Roquan Smith. And I remember people talking about all these other linebackers, and they were saying how you have to get Edmonds, you have to get Vander Esch because they're these freaks of nature. You had Tremaine Edmonds, who was like 19, 20 years old and just a brick house. And then you have Vander Esch, who had yet again another just freak of nature. And then you have Roquan Smith, who was just kind of fast, a little small, but he was the defensive player, the defensive leader for one of the best defenses. He's been the best linebacker every single year in college. Don't overthink it. And honestly, he didn't overthink it. Now it's easy to say because Vander Esch has been banged up, unfortunately, and Tremaine Edmonds really only makes splash plays. Besides that, not good in coverage, not really good outside of it, very undisciplined. So Roquan Smith has been the better player. But even before that, he's the guy you need to take. Why? Because his floor is so much better. It's about just hitting on your picks. And Roquan Smith was one of those guys that, to me, his floor was a good linebacker. And honestly, he's a great linebacker. He's an amazing linebacker. And honestly, if he would have missed, we would have just had a very average linebacker out there, which you would have been totally fine with, because that's why that's why you just take the safe pick. You take the best player available because that's what good organizations do. So I hope we do that moving forward, because this team would just get better and better and better. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can follow me at The Draft Bard, follow Unbearable Sports at Unbearable Sport on Twitter, and then we're Unbearable Sports everywhere else. You can also watch us on Tiki Live. It's a new app that you can download on your phone and also even have it on your computer. It's a cable alternative. You get all the stations from the Belly Up Sports Network. So you have fantasy football, you have hockey, you have all sorts of things. It's like free ESPN, basically. So I strongly suggest downloading the Tiki Live app and putting on some Belly Up Sports content. So thank you so much. We're finally closing the book on this. We'll never speak of them again. And Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.